Good afternoon, everyone. We are the group assigned to present about Expressionism. Our presentation will focus mainly on the definition and the historical background of Expressionism. To begin with, Expressionism is defined as the distortion of nature, as opposed to the imitation of nature, to achieve a desired emotional effect or representation of inner feelings. Expressionism is an artistic movement that emerged in Germany during the early 20th century, characterized by its use of intense imagery and a rejection of traditional forms and styles. It has a distinct use of bold, intense colors and the contrast of light and shadow. Expressionist artists often depicted the world as a dark, oppressive place full of violence, chaos, and despair, mainly because of the political and social issues of the time. Even though we highlight the work of Vincent van Gogh on this slide, it should be noted that even though he has made immense contributions in the Expressionism era, he is not an Expressionist.
Now, let me tell you about a brief historical background of Expressionism. The roots of German Expressionists lays in the works of Vincent van Gogh, Edvard Munch, and James Esler, each of whom in the period of 1885 to the 1900s evolved highly in personal painting style. Moving on to the year 1905, the Bridge, or in German Die Bodke, a group of German artists including Ernst Ludwig Kirchner and Emil Knoll is formed in Dresden. The Expressionists were influenced by their predecessors of the 1890s and also interested in African wood carvings and the works of such Northern European medieval and Renaissance artists. Fast forward to the year 1911, Die Blue Ritzer, or the Blue Rider, inspired by the works of Die Bodka, led the formation of a group of artists including Wassily Kandinsky and Franz Marc in Munich. In the year 1912, the first Expressionist exhibition held in Cologne, featuring the works of Die Bodka and many other Expressionist artists. In the year 1913, an exhibition of modern art in New York was held and named as the Armory Show, includes the work of Expressionist artists such as Kandinsky, Kirchner, and Marx. In the year 1914 and 1918, World War I. Whoa! God, that scared me. I'm very sorry about that. I'm gonna turn down that a little bit. Okay, moving on. World War I profoundly impacts the Expressionist artists, many of whom served in the war and deeply affected by the trauma and devastation of the conflict. In the year 1919 to 1923, the Weimar Republic is established in Germany, and Expressionism flourishes in the art, literature, and theater in the period. In the year 1924, the Bauhaus School is founded in Germany, which focuses on functionality, design, and rejects the Expressionist emphasis on individual expressionism and emotion. In the year 1933, unfortunately, the Nazi Party comes to the power in Germany and denounces Expressionism as degenerate art, leading many Expressionist artists to flee the country or be persecuted, which likely led to the end of era of influence and led to the beginning of abstract Expressionism. Fast forward to the year 1960s to the present, Expressionism continues to influence artists around the world, and its emphasis on subjective experience and emotions remains a powerful force in modern art. Now, moving on to the next slide, let us now discuss the factors that led or resulted to Expressionism. First is the works of Van Gogh, Edvard Munch, and James Esner. These artists used expressive possibilities of color and lines to explore dramatic and emotion-laden themes, to convey the qualities of fear, horror, and grotesque, or simply to celebrate nature with hallucinatory intensity. They broke away from the literal representation of nature in order to express more subjective outlooks or state of mind. Next is Die Vodka, or The Bridge, a group of young artists in Dresden founded Die Boca in 1905. Led by Ernest Ludwig Kirchner, the group sought to break free from traditional academic art and to create art that reflected the emotion experiences of modern life. They rejected the conventions of Impressionism and instead developed a bold, colorful style characterized by rough brushwork and simplified forms. Next is their Blue Racer, led by Wassily Kandinsky and Franz Mars in Munich. The Blue Writer aimed to create a new spiritual art that transcended traditional representational techniques. They were inspired by the ideas of theosophy and sought to express the spiritual realm through abstract forms and vivid colors. Lastly, the World War I. The trauma and devastation of World War I had a profound impact on culture psyche, leading many artists to reject traditional forms of representation and to seek new modes of expressionism that could convey the horrors and dislocation of war.
Let's now proceed to socio-political issues. Socio-political issues during an art movement play a significant role in its subject and content. In Expressionism, three main socio-political issues occurred, namely the World War I, political radicalism, and urbanization. During World War I, political tension between nations arose as alliances formed out of fear of the growing German power. This led to widespread disillusionment, trauma, and a sense of cultural crisis as the impending war looms. At the outbreak of World War I in 1914, the bold colors and jagged angles of Expressionism found a new purpose. With it, the Expressionists saw how devastating and traumatizing war could be, and as such, they gave their viewers an insight into the nightmarish war. These types of art could be seen in the painting Explosion by George Grosz and the artwork of Otto Dix, The War. Moreover, under political radicalism, many expressionist artists and writers were deeply involved in left-wing and socialist politics and saw their art as means of promoting social change. They often critiqued the existing political and economic order, calling for a more just and egalitarian society. They were particularly concerned with the impact of industrialization and capitalism on working-class people, who they saw as being exploited and oppressed by the ruling elite. They called for a radical restructuring of society that would prioritize the needs of the working class rather than the interests of the wealthy and powerful. Lastly, the rapid urbanization during the early 20th century has led to many issues, including pollution and loss of traditional values. The escalating nervousness of city life affected the perception and work of the expressionistic authors as well. This issue can be demonstrated very well by The Scream by Edvard Munch. Expressionist artists often depicted the city as a dark, oppressive force that crushed individual identity and creativity. Here are some of the most influential people and significant artists during Expressionism. First, Wassily Kandinsky was a Russian painter and art theorist. He was born in Moscow in 1866 and studied law and economics before turning to art. Kandinsky moved to Germany in 1896, where he became associated with the Expressionist movement. Kandinsky's most famous work is probably The Blue Mountain, which he painted in 1908. In this painting, Kandinsky's use of color is profoundly affected by the Fauves as he distorted colors and moved away from the natural world. He was one of the first artists to abandon representational art in favor of pure abstraction, which he believed could evoke emotions and spiritual experiences in the viewer. Kandinsky also wrote extensively on art theory, advocating for the importance of color and form in creating meaning and expression in art. Secondly, Edvard Munch, born in 1863, was a Norwegian painter and printmaker who is regarded as a significant figure in the development of Expressionism, an art movement that emphasizes the subjective experience and emotional expression of the artist. Munch's most famous work is The Scream, which he created in 1893. It is a haunting depiction of a figure with a distorted face and open mouth, set against a blood-red sky. The painting has become an icon of modern art and a symbol of existential angst and human suffering. His work focused on the inner turmoil of the individual, often depicting figures in distress, agony, or despair. He was interested in exploring the darker aspects of the human psyche and expressing his own subjective experiences through his art. His use of vivid, intense colors and bold, simplified forms, along with his willingness to experiment with new techniques, had a profound influence on the development of Expressionism as a movement. Next is Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. He was a German artist who was born on May 6, 1880 in Aschaffenburg, Germany. He is considered one of the pioneers of the German Expressionist movement. Kirchner's most famous work is his painting Nollendorf Platz in 1912, which depicts the metropolis. The viewpoint is skewed here, presenting an apparent rejection of his earlier architectural studies. His work often explored the theme of modern urban life, portraying the chaos and anxiety of the rapidly changing modern world. Kirchner was also a founding member of the group of artists known as Die Brut, which sought to create a new, more expressive form of art that rejected the traditional academic style of the time. Lastly, Katie Kollwitz, born in 1867, was a German artist known for her powerful and emotional works, particularly her prints and sculptures. She is considered one of the most important female artists of the 20th century and was a leading figure in the Expressionist movement. Kollwitz's most famous work is likely The Outbreak. It is created in 1903 that portrays Black Anna as a solitary woman who incites peasants to protect themselves and their families. Kollwitz's work was characterized by its emotional intensity and powerful social commentary. She used her art to express her concern for social injustice and the plight of the poor and working classes. Her work often depicted the struggles of women, mothers, and children, and was imbued with a sense of empathy and compassion.
There have been multiple prevalent art forms during the Expressionism era, three of which are paintings, films, and sculptures. Paintings, Expressionist painters used bold and dramatic brushstrokes, intense colors, and distorted forms to convey their inner feelings and emotion. Famous Expressionist painters include Edvard Munch and Wassily Kandinsky. Next is film. Expressionism had a significant influence on early German cinema, with directors like Fritz Lang and F.W. Murnau creating films with dark, dramatic lighting and exaggerated sets to express psychological and emotional themes. And lastly, sculpture. Expressionist sculpture often features distorted and exaggerated forms that reflect the inner emotional state of the artist. Examples include the work of Ernst Barlach and Wilhelm Lambruck.